You know, it's not every day that a huge Supreme Court case, one that affects the paychecks of thousands of people, hangs on the meaning of a single, everyday word. It almost sounds like a riddle, right? But that's exactly what happened when the highest court in the land had to figure out what the word during really means.
I mean, put yourself in this position for a second. You have a good civilian job with the federal government, and you're also a military reservist serving your country. Then you get the call. It's time for active duty. Should that active service force you to take a massive pay cut? Well, that's the question right at the heart of this whole thing.
So the person who took this question all the way to the top is Nick Feliciano. And this guy is juggling two incredibly stressful jobs. He's an air traffic controller for the FAA, a super critical civilian role, and on top of that, he's a reserve petty officer in the U.S. Coast Guard.
Okay, so between 2012 and 2017, Feliciano was called to active duty. But here's the catch. His military pay was a lot less than his FAA salary. Now, there's a government program for this called differential pay, specifically designed to cover that gap for federal employees. But for years, Feliciano was told, nope, you don't qualify. And the reason why? Well, that's where a simple story gets very, very complicated.
It all boiled down to this one little phrase, buried deep in a federal law. The law says reservists can get that differential pay if they're called up during a national emergency. And that one single, seemingly obvious word, during, well, that became the whole ballgame.
So this is it, the core of the fight. You've got two completely different ways of reading that word. On one side, you have the temporal link idea. This is super simple. During just means at the same time as. If you're on duty and a national emergency is happening, boom, you're covered. But on the other side, you have the substantive connection argument. This says, not so fast. Your service has to be directly because of or connected to that specific emergency. Two totally different outcomes.
All right, let's dive into that first argument, the idea that just being on the clock at the same time is all that matters.
So Feliciano's team, and later the court's majority, built their case on a few really smart points. First, they just said, look, what does during mean to a normal person? It means at the same time as. Easy. Second, they pointed out that Congress is full of lawyers. When they want to require a deeper connection, they know how to do it. They'll use specific phrases like during and in relation to. They didn't do that here. Plus, they had a past Supreme Court case on their side, and they even showed that the Congressional Budget Office priced out similar laws assuming all reservists would be covered, not just some of them.
And Justice Gorsuch, writing for the majority, just nailed this idea with this line. He said, absent such evidence, those whose lives are governed by law are entitled to rely on its ordinary meaning. I mean, that's a powerful idea, right? That laws should actually mean what they sound like they mean to regular people?
Okay, but that's only half the story. Let's flip over to the counter-argument, because honestly, the government and the dissenting justices had a pretty compelling case of their own.
Their whole argument came down to one powerful idea. Context is king. You can't just cherry-pick one word out of a law and pretend the words around it don't exist. And they argued that the phrase, during a national emergency, isn't just floating out there by itself, it's part of a much bigger definition.
And here's that crucial context. The law uses our phrase, during a national emergency, to help define something called a contingency operation. Now just think about that term, contingency operation. It sounds urgent, right? It sounds like it's a response to a specific, unexpected event. The dissent basically said the term itself screams that there has to be a real connection to some kind of crisis, not just any old military duty.
And this is the dissent's trump card. It's the fact that the United States has been in a near constant, never-ending state of national emergency for decades. I mean, look at this. Some of these declarations go back to the 70s and 90s, and they're still technically on the books today.
Which leads to the dissent's killer question. If the country is always in an emergency, then what's the point of even writing during a national emergency into the law? If it just means at the same time as, and that time is literally all the time, then the words become completely meaningless. They're just filler. The dissent argued there's no way that's what Congress wanted.
So you've got these two really strong, really logical arguments staring each other down, all over a single word. How on earth did this Supreme Court settle this?
Well, it was by the skin of their teeth, a 5-4 split. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know about how tough this was. This wasn't a slam dunk. A single justice's vote tipped the entire scale. And in that 5-4 decision, the court's final word was, They sided with Nick Feliciano. They ruled that, yes, during only requires a temporal link. You don't need to prove your service is connected to the emergency.
So, what's the real-world impact? It's huge. It means that any federal employee who's also a reservist is now eligible for that differential pay as long as any of those dozens of national emergencies is still technically in effect. They don't have to jump through hoops to prove their mission is related. It's a game changer.
You know, the majority didn't just stop at the dictionary, though. They offer this really interesting justification. They basically said, hey, any reservist on active duty helps the government's ability to respond to a crisis. As they put it, his work on everyday matters may free up others to handle emergent ones. It's kind of like an all-hands-on-deck philosophy for national security.
So there you have it, a huge legal fight, one that impacts the wallets of thousands of people who serve this country, all came down to one common little word. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other simple words are just sitting there buried in the law books, waiting for their turn to change everything?